Hi friends, it's Nancy, and I just want to share this flip through of this vintage baby journal, junk journal that I made. I put the finishing touches on Sunday during a live video feed, so if you wanted to go back in my videos and have a look at that, go for it. So this book is, let's get some measuring tools here. It's about 7 5/8 by just better than 5, and the spine is about 1.25 inches. So the date of this book is 1941, and it was just a plain blue cover. So I fussy cut out this image and adhered it to the this blank spot, and then sealed the whole book. Inside is a variety of pages, so original pages from the book, some children's book pages, knitting patterns, vintage gift wrap, all kinds of good stuff. So let's get started. On the inside is the original title page from 1941. And for the end papers, I have used original book pages. So in the original book, this was the end page, but then they subsequently printed additional front and backs as the fly leaf, if that makes any sense. I used a printed fabric to sew the signatures to. It is a hidden spine, and I've got a little hand tatting here, so everything is old. I've got tatting at the bottom too. This is vintage trim, so it's sort of woven trim with a little bit of lace. The book itself dates to 1934, but it's been updated and has been reprinted a number of times. But this edition was printed in 1941. This is from I believe it was a junior elf book. Alphabet. This is just some grid paper. Whoops. And here is an image of a nurse in the nursery with all of these babies. These probably are all baby boomers. And I've put that down as a pocket, and inside I've taken some vintage magazine advertisements and backed them onto card, and then zigzagged them with this sort of turquoisey thread. So that just pops in there, a little bit of lace on the edge. This is vintage gift wrap. Here I've done a fabric flip. I don't think I've ever done a fabric flip before in any of my journals. So I've got some lace and this little piece of cotton, and to hold it down because it was kind of flapping around in the breeze, I sewed on this little flower button, and there's some lace here and then another woven trim across the top. This is sketch paper from sketchbook. So this little collage is using feed sack. These are feed sack prints here. A little bit of lace, a little ribbon. This is torn from vintage gift wrap. This is torn from an old sewing pattern envelope. This page was actually the inscription in the book to Audrey on her 12th birthday with love, Ma. I wanted to preserve this, but I didn't want to make it part of the book because I found it kind of disturbing. Why would you give a happy baby, healthy baby manual to a 12-year-old? So I'm kind of worried about Audrey. So we'll just tuck that back up in there. And this is a photo, vintage photo of a mother holding her baby. And it's taken through a window. You can actually see the clouds reflected on the picture, and there's a man holding the camera in a mirror image on the window. So it was just tucked up there in that spot. And here we have a little piece of scrapbook paper. Again, I made a collage from vintage wrapping paper, a little bit of lace, vintage sewing pattern. And this was cut from an old baby knitting book. And inside I have a darling little picture of this baby in a carriage. And this vintage greeting card, which has not been used. It's beautifully colored, aged by Mother Nature. And you can unfold it so there's lots of room for journaling. And it just gets tucked in there. Oh, yeah, that was the back of that grid paper. And here I have another little decoration, little piece of collage with vintage eyelet lace, little crocheted motif. This is feed sack material. And again, another little picture from a vintage baby knitting pattern book. And a magazine ad for a copy of a What's in a Name, a booklet of 500 baby names. They must have run out of baby names after 500. Done a little fabric ruffle here, and again, this fabric has been used in a couple places, as well as the spine of the journal. Here's a guest check, sewing pattern, gift wrap, and a vintage magazine ad. That's from a 1950s Reader's Digest, actually. And here I have a tag that it's got another pocket on the back. This was an envelope from, this is one sheet of scrapbook paper. And I was quite tickled with it. So I cut the picture of that envelope out that was on this sheet of paper and adhered to the back so you can tuck a little something in there. And here is another ad from a vintage magazine. And I just really like the ad because it reminded me of when my kids were little and how it was imperative that your child had these, you know, ankle-high white leather booties, baby shoes. And it reminded me of a shoe store we had when I was a kid that actually had like an x-ray machine. So you would try your new shoes on and stick your foot in the x-ray machine to make sure that your bones were all aligned. So subsequently, many children had high doses of radiation. Here's a piece of vintage stationery with some pastel flowers. Little fold up here to hold this tag. And again, it's a vintage magazine. This was actually a British magazine. And I've stitched it to some cardstock. Another little collage with an ad. This is a fussy cut from a children's book. Lace and 2 different pieces of feed sack. That's on a guest book. This is a vintage card, a button card. I love this one. I'm so happy with how this turned out. And it has hand tatted trim, a little bit of gift wrap, and this trim, daisy trim, and this tiny little photograph of a little girl, and did I say feed sack fabric? Sure I did. And vintage seam binding for a little knot or tie there. This is an unused vintage baby shower invitation, and again it unfolds into 4 places. Or yeah, you know what I mean. So I just tucked that in that. Sewing pattern, another page from the book. And here is a little collage with feed sack fabric, fussy cut from a vintage sewing pattern, and an ad from, again, that was from that British and magazine, and a little thank you card. Not quite as vintage as some other stuff, but it was cute. Just some craft paper. This is vintage gift wrap. It even has some old tape stained. The tape's not there anymore. I peeled the tape off, but it's still got the yellow stain. And I doubled it up with some other vintage wrapping paper. This was used wrapping paper. This wasn't like new old stock wrapping paper. So yeah. Another little collage, lace, little booty, bunny, and a fussy cut from a children's book, and wrapping paper. Book page, knitting pattern book, and this isn't a tuck spot. This is just glued down to decorate. So there's a tiny little image of a little kid there. This is from a sewing pattern. This is from gift wrap. This is a piece of ledger. I love the size. I love that it's pink and green, and it's numbered with Arabic numerals like we use, but it has this Asian font across the top. So I think that's interesting. This is a book page from the last baby journal that I just made last week. A Baby is Born. Another fabric flip with this trim, some vintage eyelet lace, and vintage fabric. I don't think this is feed sack, but it is definitely vintage. Here's a little tag I made out of that scrapbook paper, and I just glued it there as a pocket, and it holds this little tall tag, or you could use it as a bookmark, and this little image of Judy at 6 months and 27 days. She's in her little knitted layette there. Super cute. All right, Judy, get back in there. This is my third and final fabric flip. Some more of that fabric that you're seeing throughout. This, I believe, came from a vintage pillowcase. A little bit of embroidered eyelet lace and some little daisy trim. This is vintage wrapping paper, and on the back I've just done this little tuck spot from a magazine ad, fussy cut from a children's book, gift wrap, and a vintage sewing pattern. And inside is this vintage card, and again, this one opens up. Oh, I guess it doesn't. It's just a little glued there. Yeah. Yeah, it had a little bit of glue there. That's okay. We fixed it. We fixed it. I love vintage cards. I have a huge box of them. Whenever I see them, I snap them up. This is vintage ledger. The dates in the ledger were 1919, 1920-ish, I believe. And it's a really nice paper. And again, it's pink and blue. This is a fussy cut from a children's book. This is a little flip out, so there's a little birth record in there, and this would be a good place for a photo, and it's hinged with fabric. On the back there's some lace, and inside is a little picture of a boy and his baby brother, I guess, and little greeting card. Super cute. Tuck that back in there. So knitting pattern, book page, again with that woven trim. A little ad from a magazine about cribs. This is another vintage button card that I've layered up some bead sack, a couple different laces, and a fussy cut from a vintage sewing pattern. This is Edith Holman book page. I like the daisy on this side. The picture on this side, not so much. But I covered it up with this little card that opens up. And it's also a tuck spot for this vintage magazine ad. I think this is cute. Another button card with gift wrap, picture from a knitting book, and fussy cut from a sewing pattern envelope. Here's a little picture of Ellen, who's 3.5, and Carol, 5 months old, from October 1960. I chose that picture because the red dress sort of matched with the red outfit and the red print. Another vintage magazine ad, and another tag made from vintage magazine ad. This is just some vintage writing paper, magazine, sewing pattern, gift wrap, and this is some hand tatted trim that I tore off. I believe I tore it off of a handkerchief. And here's a picture of Mom and her boys. There's no date on it. That just tucks in here. And on the final page, I used a couple layers of yellow lace and this little piece of yellow fabric. Here is an envelope that I've decorated by stitching around it in zigzag, and inside is a little vintage ad from a magazine, but you could put anything in there. And here is a tag, it has place for writing, and this is actually a fortune telling deck of cards. It has an owl on the back, but on the front it has storks, and you know what a visit from the stork means. So we'll just tuck those in there. I hope this stork forgets my address. So that's Healthy Babies Are Happy Babies. If you're seeing this video, this book has been listed on my Etsy shop. Thanks so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it and got some ideas that you can use in your own journals.